Stage 1 starts out with somebody who just installed Rainbow Six Siege for the first time, or maybe they're a returning player. These players are young, naive, and excited about the game they're about to play because they were told it was a tactical shooter, but they're in for a surprise. In this stage, you don't really have any operators yet, and you probably haven't even unlocked certain game modes to play with your friends, so you're going around doing situations, maybe playing tutorials in the shooting range, doing map tutorials, whatever it may be. You're just getting a general core build of the game down in your mind so that you know what's going on and how to actually move your character in the first place. Luckily for you, in the past year, Siege has implemented a lot of newer player-friendly tutorials, so you should be going through this stage very quickly, which should lead you on to Stage 2. This is when you start queuing casuals or arcade modes. It's when you start to unlock your first operators like Sledge or Jaeger, or really any of the cheap operators, because some of the operators like Grim or Kali can seem a lot more expensive than the easy to get operators like Bandit or Ash. By now, you've probably mastered most of your keybinds in terms of like what each button does, and you know how to move your character around, but you're still very new when it comes to operator abilities. You might be running Recruit, you might see your teammates running Recruit, and for the most part, it's just kind of a fun time where everyone's learning. This stage, you will begin to see where your hidden elo system may be in terms of casual or arcade playlists, because yes, Siege does keep a tally of how good you are in these game modes too. So, after around 10 to 20 games, you should feel like the enemies are about the same skill level as you, and it'll give you a little bit of a challenge. But once you play the game even more and more and more, the game becomes a lot more challenging, and you realize that there's so many different operators, so many different maps. It's a one-shot headshot game, so it's very unforgiving, and that's where you meet Stage 3, the decision. There are two pathways you can go here. You can either, A, just quit the game. This is what a lot of players do. I'd say around 50% of people who install Rainbow Six Siege, and that's lowballing it, quit the game after they reach this stage. Because once they have a few operators and realize how many operators they have to unlock and how much renown they have to get and how long that's going to take, it becomes a daunting task to even unlock operators, much less unlock the correct operators, which they don't even know how to do. They also don't know all of the maps. It's very daunting for them. They don't know where to push, how to push, what utility use, what utility counters what utility. They don't even know the enemy utility. So it's all so much, and it's so overwhelming that some players just quit. On the other hand, you keep playing. You don't let the confusion get to you, and you keep trudging on, and you hit the learning curve. This is the hardest point in any single person's career, is getting over the initial learning curve of learning every operator, learning every operator's counter, learning every map, every position in a map, every single site, how to set up all the sites, how to counter all the site setups, and everything in between. Once you have all of the general information gotten down, this is where you hit Stage 4, the learning curve. Like I said, this is the hardest stage. You have to learn so much. Not only do you have to learn every single map, which there's 16 in the ranked pool and even more in casual, but you also have to learn every single operator. There's 70 operators right now. Not only do you have to learn how to use every single ability, but you have to learn every single ability and how they interact with other abilities. Like, sure, you might know how to put a mute jammer down, but I bet you don't know that when Dokkaebi calls you with her phone, you can just step inside of the mute jammer to counter the call. And with that one operator, mute, there's 70 different interactions with mute with every single different operator that you need to know. Mute also counters walls. He also counters drones. So we're not even taking into account not primary utility, like secondary utility. Grenades, EMP grenades, all of these other things that you have to learn. You have to learn sound cues, visual cues, audio cues with people's voice lines. You have to learn how to use drones, how to use cameras. You have to learn how to quick peek, how to hold angles, how to control your recoil, which attachments do you use. There's just so much to learn that this is arguably the hardest stage, like I said, the learning curve. But once you've reached this, you get into the big leagues, which leads me into my number 5 stage, Ranked. By now, if you've been playing Ranked, that means that you're a pretty average or high level because you had to get there to unlock the rank playlist in general. This is not an easy feat to do because you had to pass the hardest stage, which I just talked about. Quick little side note, my voice is a bit nasally because I am sick, so I apologize for that. If you're in Stage 5 and you're playing Ranked, you should by now have at least half of the operators unlocked, which is really good for you because you should have half of the operators that really matter. You don't necessarily need somebody like Yana, you don't need somebody like Ash, but by now you should have people like Thermite or like Thatcher. Now that you have half of the operators and you have a bit more experience in the game, you start to actually be able to compete with your enemies. You're starting to learn things like quick peeking, you're starting to learn things like map knowledge. By now you know a lot of the operator interactions and you know what operators are used the most because you've been playing against them a lot. You know which walls might need to stay closed and which ones you might need to open. By now you've figured out, even if you don't know where you're going or what you should be holding, that you can just follow your teammates and they'll show you. You should have at least a little bit of game sense starting to form in your mind, as well as a little bit of mechanics. Things are starting to line up and they're starting to make sense now, because Siege is such a hard game to learn. With other games that you've played, you're very used to already having this feeling within 10 to 15 minutes of the game. But with Siege, you have to play a lot of hours in order to even get there, and by the way, you're not even average at the game. You still have a long way to go, but by now, you're at least a little bit confident in the fact that you can get better, and this game isn't just an impossible amount of information that gets thrown at you at all times. If I had to guess your average rank, it should be around bronze to silver. This is the most common amount of players in the entire game in one rank, for console and PC for that matter. You haven't really encountered Siege's biggest problem yet, which is cheaters, or if you're on console, it's people zimming, but you don't really need to, because you're still starting out. But once you're in ranked and you become gold, this is where stage 6 hits, which is becoming average. Now, you've gone 5 stages and you're just getting to the 6th and you're just starting to become average. Well, welcome to Siege. The average player is actually high silver to low gold. That is the most amount of player in one rank out of every single console you could possibly play the game on. We're talking Xbox, PlayStation's, PC, hell, even Nintendo Switch. But you're only gold. There's a lot of ranks in this game. There's Plat, Emerald, Diamond, Champion, and even the ranks below that you haven't even hit, and even the number of Champion that you have. So there's still a long way to go. You've got a lot to learn. You might not even have every operator yet, you haven't played every map yet, but you're getting there, and that's really all that matters. Once you've hit gold though, the next rank that you need to hit is plat, which brings me to my 7th stage, becoming plat. The reason this has to be its own stage is because, just like number 3, there's a fork in the road here. You have a decision as a person you could make. You could either A, keep learning, keep going as you're going, stay humble, start to watch YouTube content, maybe at least try to get a little better, find a stack, and you can skip plat and go straight to emerald and rank up however high your brain allows you to do. Or you could take the most common route, which is that you hit plat, which means you're at a semi-high elo, and you grow the ego of a champion in ranked 1.0. I don't know what it is with plats and low emeralds having the biggest egos in the world, but because they finally got out of gold, they think they're hot shit. Let me tell you, you still are terrible. The average ranked 2.0 champion is about the skill of a high gold in ranked 1.0, so plat really doesn't mean anything. I mean, most of the silvers in ranked 1.0 are where plat is, so if you're in plat, you have no reason to be bragging at all ever. By now, you probably should have every single operator unlocked, and like I said, a little bit of an ego depending on which path of the fork that you like to travel. But if I had to give one tip to you here, just drop the ego. You're not good, even if you have a 1.3 KD or higher. You can't blame your teammates for everything, or else you're just going to be stuck in this rank with all of your loser friends. You have to drop the ego, gain a bit of humility, and realize that you have a lot to learn still. Which brings me into the 8th stage of the Siege player, the ego death. This is where a person actually realizes that they're not that good. Maybe they started watching Spoit Online, maybe they started watching Jinxie, maybe they started watching Pro League and realized they had a long way to go. Or maybe they just logged on and had a terrible game and realized that they weren't as good as they thought they were. Either way, they finally realized that they're not a god and they dropped their ego. This might happen because you're watching a lot of YouTube videos, watching a lot of Twitch streamers. You finally have a warm-up routine. You're finally starting to learn to actually practice because you realize you need it, because you realize you aren't a god. This is where you actually start to become an above-average player. The above-average player does have a warm-up routine. The above-average player does watch YouTube videos to get better. They do watch Twitch streamers. They do watch Pro League. The above-average player does have a warm-up routine for about 5 to 15 minutes before they start their ranked session. The above-average player does actually practice their aim mechanically, whether it be in aim labs, Kovacs, or just in-game. It doesn't really matter. They're actively trying to get better, and that's all that matters. One of the biggest signs that you might have hit this stage is that you're starting to actually get friends that you can queue with because you don't have a massive ego and rage quit every time your teammates don't get a kill that you want them to. Once you've gotten here and you have friends that you can play with and a network of people around you who are also dedicated to getting better, then you'll start to notice some serious improvement. You're probably around Emerald or Diamond at this point, and you've started to notice that if you're going against a stack and you're a solo queue player, they have a much larger advantage, and you might even start to notice a sprinkle of a bit of cheaters in your lobbies. Well, you're officially above the average player, which is good for you. You're finally starting to get to the big leagues, but you're not quite there yet because you still have to hit Stage 9. Stage 9 is the Ranked 2.0 champion. They hit champion, but they realize that they're not as good as maybe other champions or as good as they thought they were. This is a little bit of the ego death that we had in Emerald to Diamond, but it's even worse because once you're in champ and you think you're really good and you still keep losing, you realize that ranked doesn't really matter. This is called imposter syndrome within Siege. Imposter syndrome within Siege essentially means that this entire time you've been trying to hit such a seemingly unattainable rank, at least to you, and then once you hit that rank, you realize that you didn't even really earn it because all you had to do was play the game a bunch to get there in the first place, and you keep losing to people who are so much better than you. So now we face the final fork in the road. You can either A, get really, really good at the game. We're talking the cream of the crop, some of the best players that you'll see. And actually, you will start to deserve champion, and instead of having champion as the logo, you'll have champion with a number on it, meaning you're in the top 5,000, 4,000, 1,000, top 100, who knows. Once you see that number, you can start to realize, hey, maybe I'm not actually too bad at this game, and I kind of know what I'm talking about. By now, you should probably have a few friends that you're dedicated to playing with that y'all play around the same time on. Maybe you've even started streaming a little bit, and congratulations, you kind of deserve it because you're in the big leagues now. Or you can take the other path, which is realizing that you're not as good and that ranked truly doesn't matter, so you just stop playing and you come back a few seasons later to try your luck again and see how the game's going. This is what a lot of players do, and honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. The issue with ranked and elo systems, not even in Siege, but just in general, is they're not an accurate representation of what your skill is. So once you reach champ and you realize that your skill was the same as it was when you were in like Diamond, and the enemy's skill are somehow still 5 times as better than you, then it's not really motivating to play the game anymore, to be completely honest. So it doesn't really matter which fork in the road you take because both are pretty valid. But let's say you take the former path in the road, where you start to play a lot and you become really, really good. Well, that's where you'll reach the 10th and final stage of every single Siege player, and that is the seasoned player. This player is consistently hitting the top 5 to 1,000 champions every single season flawlessly without effort. Your hidden MMR is probably around Diamond, so whenever the season starts you at Copper, you're gaining about 150 elo per game and losing about 10, all the way up until you hit around Diamond. This is where you start to notice that there's a cheater in your game, usually about at least 30 to 40% of all games that you play, and honestly, with this season, that's lowballing it. But hopefully, within the next season, they'll fix that. Moving back on track though, you're a pretty good player. A lot of players at this time usually will start to play competitively, and they'll usually start to become really comfortable as a player. I know it took a while to get there, but these players are usually confident. Sometimes they don't even warm up to play the game, they just queue rank because they know they're hot shit. They know exactly what positions to hold at all times, they know exactly how to adapt to their enemies, they have every single operator unlocked, they know all the maps, all the operators, all the operator counters, they know exactly when to drone, when to quick peek, when not to drone, when not to quick peek, they know exactly which bomb sites to hold and which bomb sites to give up for baiting, they know exactly how to bait, and some could say they're a master baiter. But that's pretty much it for the final stage. You become very good at the game, and honestly, if you watch this next video, you'll become even better. My name's Alka, I hope I'll see you there. Like the video if you liked it, and see you in the next video. Later.